Thanks to whoever did that. So, yeah, I suspect we'll have some more people joining. Oops, the echo is back. Leanne, could you mute? And then, okay, that's what's causing the echoing. I don't know why. But so maybe when you're not speaking, you can mute. And then I think you need to stop sharing and then start it over again, because there was something about the sharing. And then we can get started. And welcome to everybody who has joined. So I can see there's still some other people joining, but we'll get started so that we can stay on time and have enough time for any questions. So you're welcome here, and this is our weekly seminar series for the Center of Excellence in Biodiversity and Natural Resource Management. And as usual, we have Venanzi Baza organizing these seminars, and he's been doing a great job. So if any of you are interested in giving a talk, please contact him, because we always like to hear different speakers. So today is an especially nice opportunity for me, because I have one of my former students, Leanne Willery. She was a PhD student when I was teaching at Antioch University, New England. And she's now giving a talk about work that she started, I think, before she became a PhD student, and refined it during the time she was a PhD student. And I can say I learned so much from her about this process of combining art with ecology and observation of the natural world. And now she's got her PhD, she's Dr. Woolery, and she's bringing this approach to the rest of the world. So we're just really excited to have it here in our seminar. And I even think if people are interested, maybe we could go farther and do some testing out of it among some of the researchers. So for now, I want to turn it over to Leanne and have her tell us about what she's been doing with her work with this art-based perceptual ecology, and what it means, and what it can add to our work as ecologists and conservation scientists. So thanks so much, Leanne. And I'm going to mute and turn off my.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I think I'm a little new to this Google Meet, so bear with me for just a moment and see if we can make this happen. Okay, that's somehow didn't work, huh?
It was working before.
I know. So let me try opening this first, full screen, but then I can't see you. Just go to presentation mode. Okay, present now. Entire screen. Allow. It's just really.
Yeah. While you are here. Oh, that's where you were. We were seeing your screen, and what you need to do is to open your PowerPoint and make sure you can look at it in front of you and you can read on it.
There it is in front of me, and now I hit present.
Go to first of all, go to Google Meet, press present now, And if you choose to share your interest screen, do it and then go to the PowerPoint, open it, and make sure you can look at it in front of you and make it a presentation mode.
You can also send the PowerPoint to Anat or myself.
It's a very large one, so I couldn't, the sound was garbled when Bernat was talking. Could you say that again on the instructions? Beth? Or someone?
I don't really know what Anat said, and you need to mute, Leanne. Because, yeah, thanks. So can you just do what you did before when you started out? If it's not working one way, try it the other way. So select window or screen, and then, yeah, choose which one. I don't really know what else to tell you. Anat, do you think you can try to help Leanne?
Yes, Beth, I am typing. Oh, no icon now.
It's because she's muted. When she's not muted, there's an echo.
Okay, yes. You made it, Lee. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, continue. Yes. Please unmute.
Leanne, unmute. Leanne, I'm going to suggest that you turn your video off because it seems like you might have a bandwidth problem.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Just turn off your video might help.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Can you see the screen also?
Yes, everything is fine. Just maybe turn your video off and you can start.
Okay. Okay. Is everything a go?
Yes, you can start.
I'm sorry for the issues here with my technology. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Leanne Lori. Thank you to the University of Rwanda's Center of Excellence in Biodiversity and Natural Resources for having me. Thank you so much, Dr. Beth Kaplan, for the invitation, and Bernat for helping me to get through the technology this morning. And welcome, thank you to everyone that's on board today. So I'm going to be talking about a methodology that I developed called Art-Based Perceptual Ecology. And as Dr. Kaplan was saying, I started this before beginning my doctorate work, but she was very helpful in finding the patience to help me articulate what this work means. And so I'm going to share some of it with you today. And just a little bit of background. So in the early 1990s, which was during my graduate degree, I was studying art therapy, and I was introduced to what's called art-based research methodologies, which originated in the social sciences. And they were designed to work with the human population. My favorite chosen field was to work with non-human populations, plants and other organisms. And so I recognized that these methods had great potential and application to more than humans. While I was pursuing my PhD, I envisioned how I could expand these methods and then frame them within ecological and biological principles to serve field-based scientific research. Through a process, I developed this new methodology and a set of tools that responded to applied questions within the natural sciences, and specifically to study global environmental change. And the evolution of this process was the birth of art-based perceptual ecology research methodologies. What I hope to share with you today is how these methods offer integrative and holistic approaches to field-based scientific research, how they can diversify and strengthen the field of conservation biology and other disciplines, and how they can provide a bridge connecting local ecological knowledge holders with conventional science practitioners. So first, as any researcher knows, we have to understand the issue before we can address the problem. And art-based perceptual ecology honors other ways of knowing, exploring and investigating differently, thus yielding broader participation in these conservation efforts and transformative change. I want to break down the words for you and give you an understanding of what they mean to me as I put them together. So art-based means that the researcher is in the process of art making, which provides frames of reference and context to our sensory experience in the landscape. Perceptual ecology is talking about the sentient body as the connection between self and the land, or for the researcher, who is the instrument in this process, between the researcher and the subject that they are studying. Ecology gives us a way to frame and think about what our senses apprehend in this place. These methodologies are grounded in multimodal knowledge systems and sensory-based learning, and they're framed within these ecological and biological principles. Some of the ways of knowing that we're working with, and ways of knowing mean how knowledge is constructed, are tacit knowing, kinesthetic, so movement of the body. Haptic has to do with the hands and their approach to managing materials. Spatial, and embodied is one of the primary ways of knowing that we're working with. Working with the premise that the body knows much more than we can necessarily articulate in words. And then, of course, art as a way of knowing. Some of the key characteristics that are involved in practicing art-based perceptual ecology as a research methodology, the data and the art product is made in response to a research question. And we call the art that we make, whatever form it is, the data that we're working with. And I'm going to show you examples of research projects that are using this art product as a data. Again, as I said, the researcher is the instrument and engages in art making to create the data. And the process, that process of creating and collecting, and the product, the data, are of equal value. There's much that I will share with you about how insight comes about through this process of creating the data. Also important to art-based perceptual ecology that we embrace an ecocentric and concentric view when working in these methods. And they also work very well, I've learned, in concert with indigenous knowledge systems and also conventional scientific methodologies. So what are some of the issues that I'm dealing with when I apply my art-based research methods, and that you are likely dealing with your work as well? Some of these environmental challenges we're facing in the 21st century, such as biodiversity decline, water availability and equity, loss of habitat, soil erosion, and then all of the many effects we're learning from climate change. Art-based perceptual ecology is dealing with multiple languages as we're creating, collecting the data, analyzing the data. And those are visual, symbolic, and metaphoric. So we use these because visual data can communicate the land's stories in ways that numerical or mathematical data cannot. Symbols enable a universal understanding, and metaphors speak of the connections that happen between items that, again, may not seem tangible upon first approach. So the visual language, which I primarily use drawing or painting in my research collection, the visual language has a very long history in scientific thinking. And if you think about some of these connections between drawing and scientists that were important discoveries, such as Galileo's drawings of the moon, or Maria Marian's paintings of insect metamorphosis, as you see to the right. There are some folks that think that Maria Marian was the first ecologist back in 1600s. A scholar who studies these folks as well as others, and these are all scientists that were pre-photography stage, so they used their drawing as a way of inquiry and understanding the work that they were developing. This scholar thinks that during this picture process or drawing process, what was recorded had never been seen or understood before, and it was in this process of art making that cognition occurs, or that knowledge construction occurs as a result of this process. I'm going to share with you now a few examples of research that I've done dealing with biodiversity decline, and how in this process we're working with the art-based perceptual ecology methods. We're looking at new ways of perceiving by shifting our perspectives. We look at the familiar and unfamiliar ways as a way to grasp concepts and make broad connections. This is a project I was involved in a couple of years ago with National Geographic and National Park Service in the United States, doing a BioBlitz, or a biodiversity species inventory at Saguaro National Park. In this process, I used both non-conventional methodologies, the Art-Based Perceptual Ecology shadow drawing protocol, and also conventional methods. So I'm showing you the difference between those. So in the shadow drawing protocol, as you can see in these images, a large drawing tablet is placed underneath a plant, and then the outline of the shadow is drawn. In this process, we're looking at what's familiar, a way which is the plant, IDing a plant, but this is leading to a new insight. When we're trained how to identify plants in botany or biology, ecology, we learned the plant's name, we learned how to identify through its stems and leaves. With this approach, the shadow drawing, instead the researcher is asked to shift their focus of attention to the plant's shadow, this action of defamiliarization, and releasing one's direct focus on the plant, looking at the shadow, new ideas come to mind, and ways of looking come to mind that had not been experienced prior to the original way of IDing a plant. One can really understand these connections between soil, plant, biosphere, and researcher. As the method goes, in the plot one studying for the inventory, you choose 6 keystone species, and I'm working here with an ocotillo plant in the Sonoran Desert as one of my keystone species. I draw 7 shadows, separate sheets of paper, consecutively in time, so that every 15 minutes I draw another shadow. And as you can start to see here, the shadow moves across the page is what it appears. What is this implying to us? Well, it's giving us tangible evidence that we are moving as well as the Earth is in orbit. And that becomes entrance to a new dialogue to be able to discuss and find understanding in what this interconnectedness of researcher, plant, biosphere might mean. We're also working with this idea of a symbol language and pattern language. So as I lay these marks down on the page as a symbol language, I'm starting to communicate the essence of this plant in relationship to soil and air and the ecosystem around it. Patterns, which is the pattern language of the landscape, are found at multiple scales. And understanding these patterns, I am able to really get a grasp on what changes mean and the complexity of this ecosystem at a deeper level. David Abram, who is an author of Spell the Sensuous, describes this pattern language as the invisible shapes of smells, rhythms of cricket song, and the movement of shadows. Each terrain, each ecology seems to have its own particular intelligence, its unique vernacular of soil, leaf, and sky. In addition to the shadow drawing protocol, I also did a line transect, which some of you in the audience may be familiar with, a way of, again, measuring and recording plants in a very conventional process. And the outcome of that looks like this. These are my data logs on the left from the field, and then on the right as I complete a final data log. What I'm doing is counting and naming plants in a certain plot, and then giving them their Latin names and identifying how many there were as a way to then extrapolate that number and get an idea of what the plant biodiversity is in that larger park area. Another example of an art-based perceptual ecology protocol is the sound map, and we use these to study acoustic ecology and particularly changes in biodiversity. This is an example of a sound map in a disturbed area. On the left, perhaps you can see there are cattle running through the creek, and on the right is my sound map of this area. We study acoustic ecology, and again, some of you in the audience may be ecologists who study sound, because there are many ways to use this protocol as a way to monitor the acoustics. Land managers can find this very helpful in urban settings. We can use this method to study gentrification, as well as navigation or communication between species for experiencing sounds, and how that and biodiversity of organisms or changes over time due to these different natural phenomena. What happens in the sound map protocol, again, one is engaging a different perspective than what you might think of. We're not using technology, we're only using the human as the instrument to record the sound. It's a very deep listening process. And it takes time to sit for 30 minutes and only listen to the sounds around you and find a symbol language to record what those sounds may be. We are asking the researcher to sit in a three-dimensional space, so sound is three-dimensional, yes, but to translate that to a two-dimensional map. We ask them to let go of what's making the sound. We're not interested in that. Instead, we're looking at how the sound interacts with sound in this particular landscape. This is an art as inquiry process. And again, this is another example in another location where a different researcher is finding their own symbol language as a way to be able to record, remember, and understand what this interconnection is of this multi-species community, the acoustic record of it, and to understand the complexity of that system. So art-based perceptual ecology also has another principle that's very important to it, as you've seen in some of these examples, and that is meaning making. So in this one, I'm going to go back for a minute. These symbols mean something to that researcher. It's okay that they're idiosyncratic. They only have that meaning to that particular researcher. And you notice that they put a lot of notes on their drawing, and they're also instructed to write further notes as a way to recall. But the reason this is so powerful is because the human body is embedding sound within the body. Our cells, our muscles, our tendons all have memory to them, as well as our hearing process. And that's recorded as knowledge constructions happening at that time. And these symbols will then relate to that experience in place, and the researcher is able to draw on that full experience, that full embodied experience, as a way to recall what the soundscape was at that location. Another issue that we're all dealing with is water equity and availability. And I want to show you a project of how this works. And as I was saying, meaning making also has to do with the art product. So in the previous research project, I was showing you a two-dimensional flat map. In this project, I'm going to show you where, using this research methodology, we created a product, and that is our data. So again, this product that we're making is in response to the research question and also in response to place, and it becomes tangible evidence of that embodied experience on this new knowledge construction. This art project I started, back in the 90s in Chicago in the US, and called it at the time the White Dress Project. It's been renamed the Litmus Test Dress Project. It's kind of a mouthful to say, but it began for me. I was working with a group of young people in inner city Chicago and trying to help them find pathways to understand the natural world around them, and also a pathway into the sciences. With this, water was an issue because the Chicago River at that time was not a clean river, and that was the primary source of water for the people in Chicago. And I wanted to develop an art as inquiry project where these new forms of data could be used as a way of public discourse, so that how might we have conversation in our communities and conversation at a larger policy level, that we could transform these issues around who has the rights to clean water, which I work from the premise that we all have the right to clean water. So in developing this project, I came up with this symbol of the small infant dress. It's hand sewn, and each of the researchers hand sews these dresses, and they sew them within a community, a group of people. So some of you, maybe everyone is familiar with having been with a community where when you're busy doing something with your hands or your full body, when you're doing a cleanup project, as an example, the conversation can be really deep and transforming and generative in sharing what this project might mean to you. So in the Chicago first experience I did, I was working with a group of young folks, as I said, and also partnering with Friends of the Chicago River, a non-for-profit organization. And we were down at the river. The students or the researchers also do a very involved water quality testing process. In the first go-round, as you're seeing here, the students were learning about macroinvertebrates and how particular ones determined what the quality of your water was. Also involved in this project is the idea of storytelling. So I think we could all probably agree that all data tells a story of some kind, but different data can tell different stories. And one of the strengths of art-based perceptual ecology is that it uses storytelling by exactly, as I'm showing you in this project, the white dress, and people as a community coming together to address issues of water quality. So stories can make the abstract accessible. It can bridge cultural divides and connect people through heartfelt stories. And they offer a different way of understanding than perhaps more quantitative research would about water quality. So continuing with this project, once the community sews the handmade dress, we show it to a public forum. And in this case, I'm showing you an example of that first exhibit of the white dresses. In this case, I brought mud from the river and poured it over the top of the dresses in the exhibit hall. But in more current iterations of this project, we take the white dress and dip it almost ceremoniously into the water source, so into the river. Again, this is very much a process of symbolism, and it includes meaning making, because people are making these dresses on their own, and therefore they have great meaning to them, almost an ownership to the sense that they have constructed this beautiful piece of work. And then to take it to their river or their water source and dip it in there, again, many stories come about the history of water in that community and what makes water important to that individual. Within this project, there are mixed methods within the research. So not only are we using art-based perceptual ecology, but also feminist and Southern participatory action research, and also action research. I've continued this project and most recently have worked with a group of teachers in Alaska. They all had very different water sources, and you're seeing a few examples here of some of the teachers out both dipping their dress and also then doing the testing. They did a lot deeper testing with theirs. They were also looking at temperature and pH, and recording all of this information, as you can see in the right-hand side. And then one teacher had the idea that rather than symbolically using the dress as a litmus test, she chose to pour the chemicals onto the dress fabric and then drop that into the water source. And you see that in the middle image as a very colorful dress. So part of the strength of this protocol is also that you bring your own creativity to it. The methods have a certain foundation to them, but then they're meant for each individual to mold, to fit exactly what they're studying. Storytelling, as I'm expressing this project really digs into, is that it can support emotive and relational ways of knowing. And as Jane Goodall says, to make a difference, what you have to do is to get into people's hearts. And so you can do that, get into their heart with stories. Just briefly, I'd like to share with you that my business name is Citizen Artist. I started this about 3 years ago now as an actual business. I work with the premise that we are all citizens of the earth, and that we are responsible for the care and conservation of our shared home. And contrary to our name, there is no need for art experience or art skills to engage in art-based perceptual ecology, because what we're doing, again, is research, and we're using these principles of symbolism, meaning-making, shifting perspective. So Citizen Artist is a participatory science research platform. We employ these research methodologies to study changes in ecological systems and to address critical environmental issues from local to global. We work with communities, individuals, as co-collaborators in the research, and offer these trainings. Ways you can get involved. I have developed a global community since 2020. I've trained over 180 folks in these methodologies, both in person and online through my educational programs, either a 6-week online course or a 9-month apprenticeship program, and then also training in person for organizations or conservation groups that are working towards a particular research question. Also, for those of you, if you are in the US and you're an ecologist, I've been approved as a scientific content provider for the Ecological Society of America's Professional Certified Ecologist program. So if you're getting your certification, you can take my class and get CEUs towards your certification. And I would love to start something like this with other organizations that might want to bring this non-conventional research methodology in as a way to build on your scientific methods. So in conclusion, I just want to say that, again, at Citizen Artists and through these art-based perceptual ecology research methods, we believe integrative approaches to science really open the field to underrepresented communities and diversify and strengthen those fields. I hope that I've been able to show a bit of this idea for you today, how the art-based perceptual ecology research methodologies can lead to transformative solutions for sustaining biodiversity, and that they have the potential to make a difference, that this link between local ecological knowledge holders and conventional science, a bridge can be built by bringing in an understanding of the importance and value of storytelling, symbol making, meaning making, and that we can change perspectives and actions through this process towards preserving and protecting places that we love. So with that, I want to thank them so much for being here today, and thank you for the University of Rwanda. Thank you to the University of Rwanda's Center of Excellence in Biodiversity, and thank you for the exceptional work that you're doing, and thank you again to Dr. Kaplan for all the help you offered me during my doctoral research so many years ago, and for still being here and changing the world and changing my work. So thank you so much. With that, going to stop.
Great, thank you so much, Leanne. So I want to remind people that you can put your comments into the chat. You can also unmute and talk directly to Leanne. So, and Leanne, if you don't mind, you could mute when you're not speaking, we don't have that feedback. And so I don't see comments in the chat, but I think I saw a hand up. Was that, yeah, did somebody have their hand up?
I did. Hi, Adrian here. Leanne, thank you so much for your talk. That was very interesting and certainly out of my wheelhouse. So it was nice to listen to you discuss this totally different way of perceiving the world and collecting data. So, I mean, I just to kind of wrap my head around it, like when you were discussing the multi-methods that you did in the desert ecosystem where you collected both line transect and shadow data, and you were discussing how the shadows move throughout time, and thus you can kind of conceive that we're also moving. I guess I'm just wondering, what does that data look like afterwards? Like, do you as a researcher interpret the data that you collected, or is someone else interpreting it for you? Or are there multiple people that are interpreting what they see, in which case you could end up with multiple takeaway messages from that one data point? So yes, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Good question, an important one, and challenging sometimes to get across in an intro kind of presentation. Art-based research methods, it's difficult to think of comparing them to what you might know with conventional methods doing qualitative or quantitative research methods. So the data is meant to be very idiosyncratic, so very specific to the individual that made it. And with that idea, the researcher that collected the data is the one that analyzes it. So those notes that I referred to later in other research projects are very important. So the narrative that the researcher is collecting along with those shadow drawings is equally as important. because it stirs that memory for the individual as to what else was going on in that place. So with these methods, the art-based inquiry, their process is very powerful in the front end of a project. So insight, bringing insight, seeing new things that they would not have seen otherwise, because now the focus is different, literally looking down at the ground as opposed to right in front of us where our eyes naturally appear in focus when we're doing our research. Just as sometimes I've had researchers get down on the ground and look up underneath the plant as a way for another perspective, with this idea that new perspectives bring about new questions, bring about new ideas as to what that research involves. So with the actual data you were looking at on the screen, that's the second stage of the data. In the field, I only do the quick outline sketch of the shadow every 15 minutes, turning my page and doing another one. I bring the data inside to my lab and I do what's called amplifying the data, which we do with quantitative data as well. You know, we work with it constantly, trying to understand what does this data mean, move it around, do different things with it. We do the same thing with this art data. So in the lab, I am filling in the insides of that shadow drawing. With that, I'm physically moving, which again is that kinesthetic knowledge that these methods are grounded in. My body is in movement, and in that movement, new ideas are coming to me. And in that steady movement of making what is called hatch marks, which process I was using at the time, again, I get into what creativity researchers describe as flow, a moment where everything just fits and my mind is open to a lot of new ideas that it wouldn't necessarily be if I had used a different form of methodology. So I hope that answers to some degree. One other thing I think of, so when working with multiple researchers at a site like this, where we're using the shadow drawing, we share our research outcomes with each other. We're sharing our data and looking at it, and certainly others may find insight to my data that I may not have seen. But that is not the primary goal. Again, the goal is that the individual researcher is making meaning, making those physical, embodied, and conscious connections through their sensory involvement with place as a way to be aware of a much larger scene or experience within that ecosystem than they would have if they were just focused, as we did with the line transect. My focus was just totally on counting the number of plants, getting them recorded, and making sure I had the correct Latin name for them. So it's a different process, and that's a big part of the strength. And with that, I'm going to stop, and if I didn't answer your question, ask again.
No, good. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Again, you can put it into the chat or you can unmute and ask directly. I know that the kind of arts approach is quite new for many people here. Yeah.
Post alcohol, post jokes, and post memes.
Go ahead.
I was going to say something more about that, the arts approach.
Sure.
If I could. Okay. So in my classes that I teach and in my trainings and such, I can say that, I've been keeping track of who these folks are. I have a close connection with them through the educational programming. And of this 180 plus students, 95% of them are conventionally trained scientists. And they're working with other larger groups, constituencies, that are either students at universities in doctoral or master's students. They may be working with communities. I have 3 or 4 students who are in indigenous communities, so they're working with their larger community sharing these protocols with them and making connections. I have science leaders in scientific organizations, also government organizations, Environmental Protection Agency, many of the science organizations, conservation biology, that many of you are probably involved in. So about 95% of them are in that category. They define themselves as that. Ecologists, chemical scientists, geologists, botanists, all different disciplines. And then about 3% are what they identify as transdisciplinary. So they're mixing multiple disciplines together, but they find this methodology really works for them. And then about 2% are artists that come to me because they find the aspect of the art being an important part for them. So it's been very interesting to me to learn how many folks who are trained in the sciences have used creative processes on their own or in their personal life, being a musician, being a dancer, and they understand that, but had not had the opportunity to bring that creative side of themselves into their science research.
Yeah, thank you. Good. So I'm wondering if there and others have questions. I wanted to ask you a quick question. Like, do you have any kind of research questions that you're thinking about right now that apply, this approach, the art-based perceptual ecology approach? For example, any of these urgent issues you mentioned in the beginning of your talk, like with biodiversity loss and climate change, et cetera. If there's a kind of research project that uses your arts-based approach that you might be able to describe and like just briefly for us.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yes, I am. So I live in Tucson, Arizona in the US, and at the base of my hometown is a mountain range, Santa Rita and the Catalina Mountains both. Mount Lemmon is 9,000 plus feet, and there are 9 bioregions as you travel up the mountain. And so I've started a research project using the art-based perceptual ecology, looking at how does climate change cause species to move into other regions, ecosystems or bioregions. And so I've started at the base of the mountain, Mount Lemmon, and studying primarily plants, but I'm working, collaborating with a geologist, and she is looking at other issues, and we're going to collaborate with someone looking at birds. So how in these ecotone areas where one bioregion moves into another, are species moving up because of climate change issues, which would be heat in our region because we're in a desert, and at the base of that mountain is a desert range, arid range, and it goes all the way up to a very brief area of tundra at the top of the mountain. So at what point and what species might be moving up? This is a very kind of open and general research question, I realize, and on first take, what we're doing is trying to collect some data at each of the regions up the top of the mountain, all 9 of them, and then look at that data and then consider where we want to focus and think about moving up. But I think one of the things that it may relate to, particularly in Rwanda, but also many other places, at the base of this mountain, not only are there arid systems happening, we're in a desert, but the town, the city is just expanding. Human development is kind of encroaching up the side of the mountain and changing species diversity because of that as well, in addition to the heat, the temperatures, and also lack of water availability. So this may apply to some of the mountain ranges in Rwanda, as well as you look at human development, agriculture moving up into the mountains, you know, what species are having to change their habitat and what food is going to be available for them as they move up the mountain. That's one I'm thinking of, Beth.
Ah, thanks. That's pretty neat. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it's interesting to think about applications of this approach in different contexts, and I hope some of my colleagues can imagine it for some of the issues they're looking at, whether it's like pollination or elevation gradients or things like that. Yeah, so I want to invite anybody else, if you have a question or comment for Leanne, don't be shy. No, anybody?
This is Adrian again. I'll ask one more question then, if there's not somebody else at the moment. So I was thinking that in a lot of, well, natural and social sciences, you know, they're supposed to be objective, and so we're really trying to take the individual out of it. And it seems like in your methodology, the individual is like front and center. And so I'm just curious, you know, why that is and what at the individual level is important. Why is it important to have an individual perspective in the data itself?
That's a really great question, and yeah, that goes back to the beginning. I'm going to put in chat in a moment a couple of authors that some of you may be interested in looking at that go into detail of answering that question. But in short, I can say that you're right. It almost seems completely opposite of what we're trained in both social and natural sciences to be objective in our data collection. And the idea that we are being subjective, that looks at how the personal can be a story extrapolated out to the general. So when you look at one's individual story, rarely is it really an individual story. It typically speaks about what the issues are of a general, whether population or research question or location or organism that we're studying. But it's that relationship of my issue I'm studying really has to do with a larger group of people and a larger issue within the ecological issues that we're dealing with. So it's only one view. That's the other thing I think is really important. And usually I say that right in the beginning of a talk and missed it this time. It is just one view, but it does have value to it. And that's the other piece that I think I am always dealing with in working with new folks training in this methodology that have already been trained in conventional science methods, is that your way of knowing is valued. It has value, and it's an important thing to think about. It doesn't take away from the way we've been trained in conventional science at all, but it adds to it. And for some people, it's adding another layer of understanding that doesn't come with the traditional data collection. So having value, what you know is valuable. Again, just socially and culturally, many of us have been trained to not value what we know and not trust in what we know, our instincts. But in this art-based research methodology, very strongly we support the idea to value what you know, and embodied knowing is real. Thanks for that question.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, there's just like 2 more minutes. So if anybody has any other question or comment, we can take it. And otherwise, we'll look forward to next week's seminar. So yeah, if no other burning comments or questions, thank you again, Leanne. We really appreciate your time here. And we wish everybody a happy afternoon. And we'll see you next week at the same time, same place for another seminar talk. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much. And yes, if anyone has questions, you have my email, I believe, or haven't figured out how to write. Oh, there's a chat. Please get in touch with me. I'm glad to answer any further questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.